The syringe in David Pierce's hand contained enough morphine to stop a heart in minutes. But as he approached the elderly patient's bedside, he had no idea that Lisa Morgan was watching from the doorway, finally understanding the horrifying truth about her trusted colleague's compassionate care. But to understand how Lisa Morgan became the nurse who stopped a serial killer, we need to go back to where this nightmare began. Because sometimes the people we trust most are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Lisa Morgan stepped through the automatic doors of Metropolitan General Hospital at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes early for her night shift in the ICU. At 28, she was one of the youngest senior nurses in the unit, but her colleagues respected her calm demeanor under pressure and her almost intuitive understanding of patient needs. What they didn't know was that Lisa was fighting her own battle every single day. 3 months earlier, Lisa had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes after collapsing during a particularly stressful shift. The diagnosis was devastating, not just because of the health implications, but because of what it meant for her career. Without health insurance that covered pre-existing conditions, Lisa was working month to month, trying to save enough money to afford proper treatment while hiding her condition from her supervisors. In the healthcare industry, any chronic condition could be seen as a liability. Lisa had worked too hard to build her reputation at Metropolitan General to risk losing everything because of a diagnosis she couldn't control. Every shift, Lisa carefully managed her blood sugar levels, administering insulin injections in bathroom stalls and supply closets. She kept glucose tablets hidden in her pockets and had memorized the timing of her medication down to the minute. The constant vigilance was exhausting, but she couldn't afford to let anyone know. "Lisa!" called out Sandra Williams, the ICU charge nurse, as Lisa signed in for her shift. "We've got a new nurse starting tonight. David Pierce. He's transferring from emergency medical services. 10 years as a paramedic, so he knows trauma care." Lisa nodded, grateful for the additional staffing. The ICU had been understaffed for months, and the extra pair of experienced hands would be welcome. David Pierce arrived at 7 p.m. sharp, and Lisa's first impression was overwhelmingly positive. At 35, he had the kind of calm confidence that came from years of emergency medical experience. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine, and when he spoke about patient care, there was a depth of understanding that immediately impressed her. "I've seen a lot of trauma in the ambulance," David told Lisa during their initial walkthrough of the unit. "But there's something different about ICU work. Here, you get to really care for people during their most vulnerable moments." Over the following weeks, Lisa found herself drawn to David's compassionate approach to patient care. He had an almost supernatural ability to comfort dying patients and their families. Relatives would specifically request that David be assigned to their loved one's care because of his gentle bedside manner. "He has such a gift," elderly Mrs. Patterson told Lisa one evening after David had spent an hour holding her husband's hand during a difficult night. "He makes everything feel peaceful." Lisa began to see David as more than just a colleague. He was becoming a friend. During quiet moments on night shifts, they would talk about their experiences in healthcare, the emotional weight of their responsibilities, and their hopes for the future. It was during one of these conversations that Lisa made a decision that would change everything. "David," Lisa said quietly, during a break on a particularly difficult shift, "can I trust you with something?" They were sitting in the small break room, having just lost a young patient despite hours of intensive care. The emotional toll was visible on both their faces. "Of course," David replied, his voice gentle and understanding. Lisa took a deep breath and told him about her diabetes diagnosis, her lack of insurance coverage, and her fear of losing her job if anyone found out. David's response was everything Lisa had hoped for: immediate empathy, understanding, and a promise to keep her secret safe. "Lisa," he said, reaching out to squeeze her hand, "I understand what it's like to carry a burden that could destroy your career. You're not alone in this." From that night forward, David became Lisa's confidant and support system. He would cover for her during difficult moments when her blood sugar was unstable, bring her food when she needed to eat on schedule, and even offered to help her afford her medication. "We take care of each other," David would say. "That's what good nurses do." Lisa felt incredibly grateful to have found such a caring colleague. In David, she saw everything she admired about healthcare professionals: dedication, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to patient welfare. She had no idea that she was looking at something much darker. The first death that made Lisa pause happened on a Tuesday night in October. Harold Chen, a 67-year-old recovering from heart surgery, had been stable throughout the day. His vitals were good, his pain was managed, and his family had just visited earlier that evening. Lisa was updating charts when the code blue alarm sounded from Harold's room. She rushed in to find David already performing CPR, his face etched with concern and determination. "He just went into cardiac arrest," David explained breathlessly as the code team arrived. "I was checking his medication, and his heart just stopped." Despite 20 minutes of intensive resuscitation efforts, Harold Chen didn't survive. The attending physician, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, was puzzled by the sudden cardiac arrest, but attributed it to complications from his recent surgery. "Sometimes these things happen," Dr. Martinez told Harold's family. "His heart was already compromised from the surgery." Lisa felt sad about losing Harold. He'd been such a kind patient, always thanking the nurses and asking about their families. But unexpected deaths weren't uncommon in the ICU. She didn't think much more about it. 2 weeks later, another patient died unexpectedly during David's shift. Margaret Foster, a 58-year-old woman recovering from pneumonia, had been improving steadily. Her oxygen levels were stable, and she'd been talking about going home to see her grandchildren. Lisa found David in Margaret's room, tears in his eyes as he performed the final care procedures. "She went so peacefully," David said softly. "I was adjusting her morphine for pain management, and she just slipped away. At least she wasn't suffering." Lisa comforted David, impressed by how deeply he cared about his patients. Not every nurse took deaths this personally, and she respected his emotional investment in patient care. But over the following month, Lisa began to notice a pattern that made her increasingly uncomfortable. Patients were dying during David's shifts at a rate that seemed higher than normal. Not dramatically higher, just enough to be noticeable if you were paying attention. And Lisa, with her meticulous nature and her habit of tracking everything related to the ICU, was definitely paying attention. What bothered her most wasn't just the frequency of deaths, but the circumstances. These weren't patients who were expected to die. They were stable patients, recovering patients, patients whose families had been planning their discharge, and they all died the same way: sudden cardiac arrest, often during times when David was providing comfort care or pain management. Lisa tried to dismiss her suspicions. David was often assigned to the sickest patients because of his experience and his comforting bedside manner. It made sense that he would be present for more deaths than other nurses. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. The turning point came when Lisa noticed something odd about the medication supplies. As part of her responsibilities, she helped track inventory for controlled substances like morphine and other pain medications. Over the past month, their morphine usage had increased significantly, but the patient census and acuity levels hadn't changed proportionally. That's strange, Lisa muttered to herself as she reviewed the inventory logs. They were going through morphine at nearly twice the normal rate. When she mentioned this to Sandra Williams, the charge nurse dismissed her concerns. David's been doing a lot of comfort care lately, Sandra explained. He's got such a gentle touch with dying patients. Their families specifically request him because he helps them pass peacefully. Lisa nodded, but the explanation didn't sit right with her. She began paying closer attention to David's patient assignments and medication usage. The revelation came on a cold November night when Lisa was doing routine medication inventory. She was checking the morphine supplies when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Several vials of morphine showed signs of tampering. The rubber tops had tiny puncture marks that suggested they'd been accessed more times than documented, but more disturbing were the vials that seemed to contain less medication than they should. Lisa's medical training kicked in as she examined the evidence. Someone was drawing extra medication from these vials, medication that wasn't being documented in patient charts. With trembling hands, Lisa pulled the medication logs for the past 3 months and cross-referenced them with patient deaths on David's shifts. The correlation was undeniable. On nights when morphine usage spiked, patients died unexpectedly. Her heart pounding, Lisa realized she needed to investigate further. She began staying late after her shifts, quietly reviewing patient charts and medication records. What she found confirmed her worst fears. David Pierce wasn't the compassionate nurse she'd thought he was. He was systematically overdosing patients with morphine, causing the very deaths that had earned him his reputation as an angel of mercy. As Lisa delved deeper into her investigation, she made another discovery that sent chills down her spine. Her own insulin supplies, which she kept in her locker, showed signs of tampering. Someone had been accessing her medication, someone who knew about her diabetes and where she stored her supplies. The insulin in her vials had been diluted, replaced with what appeared to be saline solution. The realization hit her like a physical blow. David had been slowly poisoning her insulin, potentially putting her life at risk. But why? Lisa's mind raced as she considered the implications. David had been positioning himself as her protector, her friend, the one person who knew her secret and supported her. But he'd been sabotaging her medication while presenting himself as her ally. That night, Lisa confronted the terrifying possibility that David's interest in her wasn't friendship. It was something much more sinister. Perhaps he saw her as another patient to help transition peacefully. Perhaps her diabetes made her seem like someone who was suffering, someone who needed his twisted form of mercy. The thought made her physically ill. Lisa knew she couldn't go to the hospital administration with her suspicions, not without concrete proof, and not while her own job was at risk due to her hidden medical condition. Instead, she decided to conduct her own investigation. Over the next 2 weeks, Lisa carefully documented everything. She photographed the tampered medication vials, made copies of medication logs, and tracked the correlation between David's shifts and unexpected patient deaths. She also began watching David more carefully during their shifts together. What she saw chilled her to the bone. David's compassionate care followed a specific pattern. He would spend extra time with patients who were stable but experiencing some discomfort. He would offer to manage their pain medication personally, often sending family members away for breaks. Then, within hours, these patients would experience sudden cardiac events. The most disturbing part was David's behavior afterward. He would comfort grieving families, often tearfully describing how peaceful the patient's final moments had been. He genuinely seemed to believe he was providing a service. Lisa realized she was witnessing the behavior of someone who had completely rationalized his actions. In David's mind, he wasn't committing murder. He was providing mercy to suffering patients. Lisa knew she needed to stop David, but she also knew that a direct accusation would likely result in denial and potentially put more patients at risk. She needed irrefutable evidence, and she needed to catch him in the act. Her opportunity came on a Friday night when David was assigned to care for Eleanor Martinez, an 82-year-old woman recovering from a mild stroke. Eleanor was stable, alert, and expected to be discharged within a few days. But she had been complaining of some discomfort, and Lisa overheard David offering to help her feel more comfortable. Lisa positioned herself where she could observe David's activities without being noticed. She watched as he prepared a syringe in the medication room, drawing from a morphine vial and filling the syringe with far more medication than any standard dose would require. Her heart racing, Lisa quietly followed David toward Eleanor's room. She needed to witness what he was doing so she could provide testimony that would be believable to authorities. Lisa positioned herself just outside Eleanor's room, where she could see David approaching the patient's bedside with a prepared syringe. Eleanor was awake but drowsy, trusting, and vulnerable. "This will help you feel much better, Mrs. Martinez," David said softly, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine compassion. "You won't have any more pain after this." Lisa watched in horror as David inserted the IV line that would deliver the fatal dose. She had perhaps 30 seconds before the morphine would enter Eleanor's system and cause irreversible damage. In that moment, Lisa faced the most difficult decision of her life. She could call for help, potentially saving Eleanor, but also exposing her own medical condition and investigation. Or she could try to stop David herself, risking a confrontation with someone who had already killed multiple patients. The choice was clear. "David, stop," Lisa said firmly, stepping into the room. David froze, the syringe still in his hand, his expression shifting from surprise to something much more dangerous. "Lisa," he said slowly, "you shouldn't be here." "Put down the syringe, David," Lisa replied, moving closer to Eleanor's bed. "You don't need to do this." David's demeanor changed completely. The gentle, compassionate nurse vanished, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "You don't understand," David said, his voice taking on an edge Lisa had never heard before. "Mrs. Martinez is suffering. I'm helping her." "She's recovering, David. She's going home to her family." "She's dying slowly," David insisted, his grip tightening on the syringe. "I've seen it before. The pain, the fear, the slow deterioration. I can spare her from all of that." Lisa realized she was listening to the rationalization of a serial killer who genuinely believed his actions were merciful. "David," Lisa said carefully, trying to keep her voice calm, "how many patients have you helped?" For a moment, David's facade cracked, and Lisa saw something broken and twisted underneath. "I don't keep count," he said quietly, "but I saved them all from unnecessary suffering, just like I was trying to save you." The admission about her insulin tampering confirmed Lisa's worst fears. "My medication," Lisa said. "You've been changing my insulin." David nodded, his expression almost proud. "Your diabetes is going to cause you so much pain eventually. Blindness, kidney failure, amputations. I could spare you from all of that." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. David had been slowly trying to kill her while positioning himself as her closest friend and support system. "The ambulance service," Lisa said, suddenly understanding. "You did this before, didn't you?" David's expression darkened. "There was a child," he said slowly. 7 years old, car accident. We got to him too late, and he died in agony in the back of my ambulance. His parents were screaming, begging us to save him, and there was nothing we could do." Lisa began to understand the twisted psychology that had created this monster. "That's when you decided to start helping people," she said. "That's when I realized that sometimes mercy means letting go," David corrected. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is spare someone from a painful death." "David," Lisa said firmly, "Eleanor Martinez isn't dying. You're not sparing her from anything except the chance to see her grandchildren grow up." "You don't know that," David insisted, but Lisa could see doubt creeping into his expression. "Look at her charts," Lisa said. "Look at her vitals. She's stable, she's recovering, and she has years of life ahead of her." For the first time, David seemed to waver, but his grip on the syringe remained firm. "It's too late anyway," he said quietly. "You know what I've done. I can't stop now." "Yes, you can," Lisa said, stepping closer. "Put down the syringe and we can get you help." "Help?" David laughed bitterly. "Lisa, I've killed 23 people. There's no help for that." The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. 23 patients who had trusted David with their care. 23 families who had been grateful for his compassion. 23 murders disguised as mercy. "David, please," Lisa said, reaching out her hand. "Give me the syringe." For a moment it seemed like David might comply. Then Eleanor Martinez stirred on the bed, moaning softly in her sleep. "You see," David said, his resolve hardening. "She's in pain. I have to help her." Lisa realized that talking wasn't going to work. David was too far gone, too committed to his twisted mission of mercy. She had only one chance to save Eleanor Martinez and stop David from killing again. As David raised the syringe toward Eleanor's IV line, Lisa lunged forward and grabbed his wrist. The two nurses struggled, David stronger, but Lisa more desperate. "Let go, Lisa," David hissed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Security!" Lisa screamed as loudly as she could. "Help! Security!" The struggle continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. David tried to push Lisa away while maintaining his grip on the syringe. But Lisa held on with the desperation of someone who knew that letting go meant watching another innocent person die. Finally, Lisa managed to grab David's hand and force it away from the IV line. The syringe fell to the floor, its contents spilling harmlessly onto the hospital tiles. Within moments, security guards burst into the room, followed quickly by other nurses and the night supervisor. David didn't resist as they restrained him. He simply stood there, looking at the spilled morphine with an expression of profound sadness. "You don't understand," he said quietly as they led him away. "I was trying to help them." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of David Pierce's crimes. 23 patients over a period of 7 years across 4 different hospitals. Each death had been attributed to natural causes or complications from existing conditions. David's reputation as a compassionate nurse had protected him from suspicion. The toxicology reports from exhumed bodies confirmed what Lisa had discovered: massive morphine overdoses disguised as comfort care. David had been systematically murdering patients while positioning himself as their angel of mercy. During his interrogation, David maintained that he had been helping his victims, sparing them from prolonged suffering. Psychiatric evaluation revealed a complex personality disorder combined with severe PTSD from his years as a paramedic. The irony, Dr. Patricia Williams, the forensic psychiatrist who evaluated David, explained to Lisa, is that he genuinely believed he was providing compassionate care. In his mind, he was the only one with the courage to end suffering when others wouldn't. Lisa struggled with guilt over her friendship with David and her failure to recognize his true nature sooner. But the psychiatric evaluation made it clear that David had been extremely skilled at manipulation and deception. "He targeted you specifically, Doctor," Williams told Lisa, "because your medical condition made you seem vulnerable. In his twisted worldview, you were someone who needed his protection and eventual mercy." The revelation about David's crimes forced Lisa to make a difficult decision about her own medical condition. The investigation had exposed her diabetes, and she knew she could no longer hide it from her supervisors. To her surprise, the hospital's response was supportive rather than punitive. Lisa's courage in stopping David had saved lives, and her medical condition was seen as something to be accommodated rather than a reason for termination. "Lisa," Sandra Williams told her during a meeting with Human Resources, "your actions prevented multiple murders. Your diabetes doesn't change the fact that you're one of the best nurses we've ever had." The hospital helped Lisa obtain proper insurance coverage and medical care for her diabetes. More importantly, they implemented new protocols for monitoring controlled substances and tracking unusual patterns in patient deaths. David Pierce's trial was a media sensation that raised uncomfortable questions about how serial killers could operate undetected in healthcare settings. Lisa testified about her investigation and her confrontation with David, providing crucial evidence for the prosecution. During his testimony, David maintained his belief that he had been providing mercy to suffering patients. He showed no remorse for his actions, only sadness that he wouldn't be able to continue his work. "I helped them," David said from the witness stand, his voice steady and convinced. "I gave them peace when no one else would." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding David guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for Lisa, the trial was just the beginning of her healing process. A year after David's arrest, Lisa Morgan had become something she never expected, an advocate for patient safety and healthcare reform. She spoke at medical conferences about recognizing signs of healthcare serial killers and the importance of robust monitoring systems. "The scariest thing about David Pierce," Lisa would tell audiences, "wasn't that he was a monster. It was that he was a monster who genuinely believed he was doing good. That combination of evil and self-righteousness is almost impossible to detect until it's too late." Lisa's diabetes was now well managed with proper medical care and support from her colleagues. The condition that had once threatened her career had become a source of strength, reminding her daily of the importance of honest communication and proper medical care. She received hundreds of letters from healthcare workers around the country, many sharing their own stories of suspicious colleagues or concerning patterns they'd noticed but hadn't known how to address. "Your courage saved lives," one nurse wrote. "But more than that, it reminded us that we have a responsibility to speak up when something doesn't feel right, even when that someone is our friend." Eleanor Martinez, the patient Lisa had saved that night, recovered fully from her stroke and lived to see her great-grandchildren born. She sent Lisa a card every year on the anniversary of that night, thanking her for the gift of continued life. The families of David's victims found some measure of closure in knowing that their loved ones' deaths hadn't been in vain, that the investigation and trial had led to reforms that would protect future patients. David Pierce remained in prison, still believing that he had been a healer rather than a killer. Psychiatric treatment had been unable to convince him otherwise. "Some people can't be saved," Dr. Williams told Lisa during one of their follow-up conversations. "But because of your courage, we understand this type of killer better, and we're better equipped to stop them." Lisa continued working in the ICU at Metropolitan General, but with a new appreciation for the weight of trust that patients placed in healthcare workers. She became a mentor to new nurses, teaching them not just medical skills, but the importance of vigilance and advocacy. "We hold life and death in our hands every day," Lisa would tell new graduates. "That's not just a responsibility. It's a sacred trust. And when someone violates that trust, it's our duty to stop them, no matter how difficult that might be." 5 years after that horrifying night, Lisa Morgan sat in her office at Metropolitan General, now serving as the Director of Patient Safety. The title was new, created specifically for her after hospital administration recognized the need for someone dedicated to identifying and preventing the kind of systematic abuse David had perpetrated. On her desk was a photo of Eleanor Martinez surrounded by her family at her 87th birthday celebration. It served as a daily reminder of why Lisa's work mattered. Sometimes she thought about David Pierce, wondering if there had been signs she'd missed earlier, if she could have saved more lives by acting sooner. But her therapist had helped her understand that dwelling on those questions wasn't productive. "You stopped a serial killer," Dr. Sarah Chen, her counselor, reminded her regularly. "You saved lives, and you helped create systems that will save more lives in the future. That's your legacy." Lisa had learned that heroism wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear when lives were at stake. She'd been terrified that night in Eleanor's room, but she'd acted anyway, because staying silent would have meant watching another innocent person die. The nurse they'd called an angel of mercy had been exposed as the angel of death he truly was. And the nurse who'd hidden her own medical condition out of fear had become the advocate who helped protect countless future patients. Sometimes, the most important moment in your career is the one when you have to choose between your own safety and doing what's right. Lisa Morgan had made that choice, and it had changed everything. Lisa's story became a cautionary tale taught in nursing schools across the country, but it was also an inspiring example of professional courage. She proved that healthcare workers have a responsibility that goes beyond treating patients. They must also protect patients from those who would abuse their trust. In healthcare, Lisa would say, during her speaking engagements, we often talk about do no harm. But sometimes that means actively stopping someone else from doing harm, even when that someone is your colleague, your friend, or someone you trusted. The database of controlled substance usage that Lisa had helped develop became a model for hospitals nationwide. The patterns that had allowed David to kill undetected for years were now easily identifiable through automated monitoring systems. But perhaps most importantly, Lisa's story reminded healthcare workers that speaking up about suspicious behavior wasn't just allowed, it was required. "Patients trust us with their lives," Lisa would conclude her presentations. "That trust comes with the obligation to protect them from anyone who would violate it, regardless of how difficult or frightening that protection might be." The ICU nurse who had exposed the angel of death had become something much more important. She'd become the voice that reminded an entire profession of its most sacred duty. Sometimes the most dangerous person in a hospital isn't a patient or a visitor. It's the colleague standing right beside you, wearing the same uniform and carrying the same responsibilities. And sometimes the only thing standing between a killer and their next victim is another healthcare worker with the courage to act on their suspicions. Lisa Morgan had been that healthcare worker, and her courage had saved countless lives. If you've been moved by Lisa Morgan's incredible story of courage and professional integrity, subscribe to Profession Stories for more amazing tales from the healthcare world. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect others in your profession? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember, in healthcare, silence in the face of suspicious behavior isn't just unprofessional. It can be deadly. Sometimes, the most important skill a healthcare worker can have is the courage to speak up when something doesn't feel right. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let us know what you think about Lisa's brave decision to stop a colleague who was using medicine to murder rather than heal.